Well, welcome everybody. I'm really glad you could make it here. Again, we're really lucky to have another excellent advocate for their course and their profession. So we've got Bruce Montgomery here from the University of Creative Arts and from their fashion section, courses, selection of courses. So we're going to be hearing a lot about the courses themselves, the graduates from these programs, what they go on to do, obviously the type of work that they tend to go into, and of course, as always with these discussions, some of the transferable skills that you can learn from different courses that can be applied to other sections of the economy. So thank you again for joining. As you can see, Bruce has already got his presentation lined up and ready to go. So Bruce, I'm going to hand over to you now. Actually, just before I do, I forgot my couple of bits of housekeeping, so let me get those in now. As always, if you want to ask Bruce anything at all, please add that to the chat. You've got chat function here. Just put any questions you like into that, and we'll put them to Bruce at the end of his presentation. And we've also got Felicity here, who works more on the administration side. So if you have any technical questions about getting into the university, she can help you with those as well. Just to say as well, one final thing is this meet is due to end at 10:02. Bruce has another very important meeting to get to. So we're going to end ever so slightly earlier than normal. So just be aware of that. All right. Okay, Bruce, I'll hand over to you now.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, everybody. So yeah, as we were saying, the presentation will give you hopefully a good overview about what goes on in UCA fashion. So on the campus, we've got a lot of fashion courses. I've based the presentation mainly around the BA Honours Fashion course, but to let you know that there is fashion management and marketing courses, fashion journalism, fashion communication. And the beauty of this means that you mix with peers on other courses, so you're already starting to build your network. My own network, I started at university and it's served me all the way through my career. So I think that's quite an important point to make early on. Just to give you an idea of some of the facilities, we've got studios that are fully equipped to industry standard on both the fashion courses, the one at Rochester and the one at Epsom. We've got laser cutting facilities, Gerber facilities, photo studios, Mac computer suites, fabric store so that you can get calico, fabric, fusing presses. We've got basically everything you need to make a full collection. Just an insight into some of the team, because the point is that while the team are academics, they all either are still working in industry or have worked in industry for a long time. We also bring in sessional staff, which means, for example, the person teaching you pattern cutting will be working as a pattern cutter for a major designer when they're not teaching you. So that the teaching really is live and up to date. So one of the things we do pride ourselves on is creativity and innovation. Very important in fashion that you're always looking to the next new idea. No one's really interested in repetition. People always want to be looking at the next trend. So here, for example, and everything starts from a design brief. Here, the student has taken the brief and has started to work through their ideas in calico and then do fittings on the model. You can see their sketches there, and on the right-hand side, you can see the final illustration. But underpinning that is always research. So here on the left, you can see the concept, what the research came from, the fabric swatches. So from the word go, thinking about the fabric. And again, on the right-hand side, you'll see the development process that took place. So it's all about experimentation and then arriving at a finished article. One of the things we pride ourselves in is teaching pattern cutting as a skill, as well as teaching you how to design. It makes you a better designer, but it also, as I said, allows you to have an additional skill, because it could be that you decide in the end you don't want to be necessarily the designer, but you want to be the head pattern cutter. And by teaching you sort of in the way we do, it's very user-friendly, and you'll find that you're able to then make better garments from knowing exactly how things are constructed. The example here shows an unusual layout for the outfit. It's quite interesting how once you get on the stand, we move quite quickly away from traditional shapes. Again, reiterating the pattern cutting, because here you can see quite nicely from the initial concept through to working on the pattern on that particular sleeve. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see how that pleated sleeve detail became quite a key feature of the garment. So the whole process is really about an initial idea and then working it through into something that becomes quite dynamic. 1 day a week you would do design history and theory, and that's very important because you can't look to the future of fashion if you don't know what went on before. It's also very important to understand social trends, what has influenced fashion through the years, what people have said about fashion, what people have written about fashion. So you build up through the years doing essays that are part of your academic submission, but by the 3rd year you do a full dissertation. We always enter competitions on whatever course you're in. So just an example here of companies that we've worked with, particularly with the British Fashion Council, Graduate Fashion Week, but we've done competition work before with ASOS, Topshop, Ralph Lauren. So always looking for the industry links. So a little bit now about course structure. So in year 1, for example, you would have an introduction to design. You would work on your visual communication. So we'll help you with CAD, Photoshop, InDesign, Illustrator. You would do some life drawing, which is there in the illustration, because fashion illustration is underpinned by life drawing the human body. And then at the same time, that works through into your design work. Creative cutting and construction is where the design projects come in, and you'll from a brief, you'll end up going through that full design process and making up a full outfit on your own, but supported by technicians. And then, as I said, 1 day a week, you have your fashion history and theory. In year 2, innovative design practice is a tailoring project. So you'll learn how to make a proper tailored jacket. Creative drape practice is when you work the other way around. So if innovative design practice is 2D to 3D, creative drape practice is 3D back to 2D. So you would go straight onto the stand, come up with some unusual designs, and then work it back into a flat pattern so that you can then make up a garment. You go out on professional placement for 6 weeks. We've got a great database. We'll help you find a placement. It's normally great experience for the student, because then you really get to see what industry's like before you graduate the year later. And again, you're starting to build up even more your contacts within the industry. And then again, in year 2, you do more of the theory work. Just some examples of placements. Again, you'll see small names, big names. It's a great, as I said, we've got a great variety of companies we work with. And obviously we've now got a lot of alumni, ex-UCA alumni who are working in the industry. They phone up and see if, from time to time, to see if a student is available for placement. We contact them, and just generally, we've got a great industry connection. In the 3rd year, you get the option to either make a full final collection of 6 outfits, or to choose the fashion and branding option, where you make 2 outfits with a factory. So you get to understand how the industry works from an industrial perspective. Both will get you a career in fashion. Both is the same degree. Academic-wise, it just gives you a slightly different perspective based on the skill set that you have arrived at to date. For both options, you produce a professional portfolio that you can then take out to seek employment, and both options do a dissertation. And again, more examples of student work on the right-hand side from recent graduates. So just a little bit more about the option 3, sorry, the year 3 option 1. This is where you spend a lot more time on concept development work, innovation, looking at materials. You're thinking really about a catwalk collection. So there's a lot of creative cutting and then making up the garments. You can see the process sort of flicking through on the right-hand side. And there you've got the end collection on the catwalk. In the other option, for example, you would spend a lot more time looking at trend, branding, market analysis, industry collaborations with the factory. And I think it's really important that you learn how to work with a factory early on, what sort of expectations they have, what level of pattern you need to send them, the trims, the fabric, how to do a proper spec sheet, how to cost the garment. It would also create your own brand and right down to swing tickets and packaging. So we always like to feel that we create success. And what I mean by that is we have students that win competitions, that get shortlisted for competitions. It's very important that you're driving towards great achievement. So here we've got Melanie, who's just completed a residency with TikTok, and that was the garment she produced for their merchandise. And on the other side, we've got a student that was shortlisted for the FIDA Fashion Illustration Awards. We won the Fashion Illustration Award this last year, and this was the work of Jasmine. Some great illustration work, quite intricate, and I think you can see why it won. It's just got its own unique identity. Constanza did really well. She was selected to do a placement at Ralph Lauren. They sent a team over. They looked at students from all the universities in the UK, and then they made a very small selection of a number of students to go out to New York, and she was one of them. And then she did extremely well out there, and her final collection was extremely strong. So that again it was just a great sort of connection that we have. Evelyn won the Hilary Alexander Trailblazer Award. This was a great collection. She used inspiration from her own cultural background. She got to go to the Houses of Parliament for a British Fashion Council event. And I think Graduate Fashion Week really enjoyed this collection. It was dynamic, it was fun, but it also had a cultural underpinning. Priya is a great success story. She graduated from the BA Fashion course at Epsom in 2015. She's recently this year won the LVMH prize for up and coming designers. She's featured in the Forbes 30 under 30. She's got her own studio now, is showing in London Fashion Week, and is just a phenomenal success story. But it all started when she just joined the fashion course at Epsom, and it's just been uphill from then, but she worked really hard. Another student, Robert Sanders, shows at London Fashion Week. This is his menswear. And again, he's doing something a little bit different, manipulating fabric, new silhouettes. Going back a little bit, in 2016, we won the Graduate Fashion Week Women's Wear Award, and David Band then went on to do an MA. But again, you can see this was a great collection with the Trompe d'Oeil effect. As I said, we do link up a lot with industry. We are a member of the British Fashion Council Colleges scheme, and Alexander Jones won a sponsorship, basically, which has allowed him to set up his own brand. It was a great menswear collection, which industry thought was a very worthy winner. Tiara produced this really colourful collection, but it was the accessories that caught the eye of industry. You can see that bag there with the fringing, and it just links into the whole collection. So again, we do encourage the collections to be accessorized, so it is a total look. And on the right hand side, you can see her picking up her award. This was Africa's collection, and the point about this, which I think is quite fun, is the sustainability element. The fabrics you see there are actually her grandmother's curtains with the fringing. She found them in the attic of her grandmother's home and thought, I can do something with this, and produced an amazing contemporary collection. Another example of Eden. Eden had joined the course knowing very little about fashion, worked her way up through the course extremely hard, produced this very strong collection based on icons. And on the right hand side, you can see she got a write-up in Vogue about her collection. So again, great achievement. I think it's always very important to show you the type of places where UCA students end up working. So we've got students at Louis Vuitton, Ralph Lauren, Matthew Williamson, Kenzo in Paris, Topman, Adidas, Fat Face, Ben Sherman. So high street names here, as well as large luxury brands. And again, that helps us with the placement network. Do follow us on UCA Epsom Fashion. We post the work from all sorts of students, not just final year. You can see fashion illustration work, you can see design work. You just generally get a good insight as to what students are up to. And now just to tell you a little bit more about some of the courses on offer. So this is the BA fashion course. You could go on, for example, to be a creative director, a pattern cutter. You could go on to be a stylist. You could be, a head designer. There's all sorts of options. I've listed where some of our alumni are. In terms of portfolio advice, we always say it's about potential. So when you're submitting your portfolio, show all your drawing skills, show any design projects you've done, show that you've got color, interest, that you experiment with any recycling materials, that you visit exhibitions. Just generally show us all your design potential in sort of sketchbook form, but then in a more polished part of the portfolio, show us your best work. So do a very selective then set of your best drawings and illustrations and project work. Over at Rochester, there is also a fashion course. It's very similar in a way, but slightly different in it's more technical. They've got the Gerber setup, which is in industrial pattern cutting in effect. The patterns are all digitally produced. They have a slightly different structure. But again, you can see where the alumni end up. They tend to be, as I said, more technical, a little bit more on the pattern cutting side and the construction side, but it still is a good design course. We follow things through to MA level. So if you, for example, did a BA at either Epsom or Rochester, you can then go on in a very smooth transition to do an MA. And here's an MA in printed textiles for fashion and interiors. They've worked very closely with Sandra Rhodes, and again, some exciting work comes out of this course. This is a new course that we're just about to launch, MA in Virtual Fashion. The industry is going more and more towards 3D, and we think it's important to keep up with trend, make sure that students have got the skill sets they require. So this is coming on board from September. And that's me arrived at the end of the presentation. I'll be very happy to take any questions.
That was lovely, Bruce. Thank you very much. And again, it's always great to see. I think we've had a lot of similar designers, things like product design and things like that. But from the student work, I think fashion is so good to see so many completed things, and it's such an immediate form. You can see the creativity, you can see those ideas straight away. So hopefully the students have been quite inspired by some of that stuff. So that's really great to see on that. I just thought I'd very quickly, Bruce, just ask you a little bit about yourself, really, and your own background and how you've got into it. As you mentioned earlier, particularly with fashion, perhaps more than any other, but certainly any of these very vocational courses, you tend to have, you said, working practitioners. So what's your own background coming into it, and are you still working in the industry directly?
Yes is the answer, but I guess the way I started was exactly as we've been talking about this morning. I joined a BA fashion course. That's where I really learned the basics, got inspired, learned how to design, research, put together patterns, make garments, put together a portfolio, did a final collection, and then took that portfolio out to industry. And I think the thing is never give up, because, you know, I would show my portfolio to a design company that I liked, and they would say, sorry, we like it, but we don't have an opportunity. Went to the next one, etc. Getting lots of no's. And then finally, I got a yes. And once you've got the yes, that's you in the door. And from then you start to build your network. And then you've got a much better insight, because you're actually then working. You're no longer a student, you are actually working. Your skill set, you know, then goes up a notch. But your CV suddenly becomes one of experience and not just purely a student CV. So that first step is crucial. And that's why your portfolio that we help you build up is really important. So we build up your skill set and your portfolio through the 3 years, so that when you go out, you're able to then convince companies to take you on. And that's how I started. And from then on, it was just a sort of step-by-step progression through the industry.
Okay, that's brilliant. Great to hear. We've got something in the chat here, so let's have a look. Okay, yeah, and this is really good questions from the students. So is designing for the high street and designing for the kind of higher end brands at the same thing, or perhaps very quickly do you notice students sort of veering one way or the other where that's concerned?
It is slightly different. At the end of the day, it is all about, you know, designing clothing. And so you've still got to know how to research and design and come up with innovative ideas. The big difference is that the luxury brands spend a lot longer on working on their concept, the quality of the garments, the way they're manufactured. Whereas the high street, it's about getting a trend and getting the garment made up quite quickly and getting into the market and then on to the next trend. So they work in quite big teams in the high street on very quick concepts, dropping them into the shop literally sort of week after week or every 3 weeks at a time. Whereas the high street, it's much more about a big presentation, then selling the collection in retail, and then moving to the next collection. You do tend to spot students quite quickly. Maybe by about the second year, they're starting to show either a preference or just a skill set. Because as I said, if you're for the high street, you need to be able to really work at an extremely fast pace with a lot of ideas. Whereas the high street, it's more about someone who sort of has a strong idea and they really want to see it through a full process.
Just one of the things, and maybe I relate this more to the high street end of things, but I suppose for all areas of the industry, when we do research into kind of broader kind of future careers and indeed what any industries are looking for, one of the key things is always sustainability. That's always something that comes up. Is that something that, well, I guess from the course point of view is important? Do you think that is something within the broader fashion industry, and perhaps particularly the high street, it is considered really important? And it is an important sort of concept and thing for the students to be understanding.
Yes, I think it's imperative now, because there is too much fashion clothing going to landfill. We try to underpin from the word go to the students the need to think about recycling, where they're getting their fabrics from. Are they using fabrics that can be, completely recycled once they've had their life? Looking at new threads, that sort of thing. So yeah, it is very important. And I think the industry finally is beginning to wake up to the fact that it has to really look at itself. We are overproducing. That is one critical factor of the fashion industry. We're overproducing for the demand. But once that gets adjusted, then I think the industry will be in a better place.
Okay, that's really good to hear. Again, obviously, this is a big kind of for all of us, really. But I mean, we all of the guests that we've had onto these talks, obviously, we talked about current pandemic and how much that's changed their current industry, and how much of it. And I think you just illustrated with your MA course there, and then how much was probably already going into a slightly more virtual space. But has this? Have you noticed a particular acceleration? Obviously, you yourself are working from home at the moment, but what in all of that stuff do you think's come out of it? What has been accelerated, particularly within fashion?
Yeah, I mean, we can't deny it. It has affected the fashion industry. London Fashion Week, for example, has had to go online. Showrooms where buyers used to go in and be able to spend a long time looking at the clothing in detail. Again, a lot of them have had to do it through digital methods. People holding up clothing and making a buying purchase based on just seeing it and talking it through in that way. But the industry always reacts, and it's been incredible how some new ideas have come out, some great new presentations have arisen through designers having to work more virtual. I think it will calm down, hopefully, eventually. But I think what is interesting is when we get back to the supposed new normal, I think what we'll have learned from this will be carried forward. So while we will hopefully go back to showrooms and trade fairs and places where the fashion industry can meet, I think what we've learned from the digital and virtual side will be retained. So there's always a positive comes out of a negative.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd maybe think as well, what obviously looking kind of forward, and obviously by the time our students get to the workplace, obviously going to be a fair few years' time. What other areas we're looking at being developed? Are there any things that you see as being kind of key developments within the fashion industry more broadly? I guess that's in terms of areas of design or incorporating technology. I mean, there's a whole sort of world of them, really. Is there anything particularly you think is somewhere where a lot of students are maybe heading towards?
Well, as I said, sort of the 3D design element is important. But what was interesting is the students who were in the first lockdown, so the third year, they've actually graduated now. While they gained a little bit less in construction methods because they weren't able to spend as much time in our fashion students making garments, their actual design work and design presentation skills improved dramatically because they were able to spend a lot more time on it. So I think that will serve them well for getting into the industry, because the industry now is working very digitally, and then it will ease off because then they'll be able to backtrack and they'll pick up some of those making skills in industry. So I think it's a case of each year at the moment is just having to adapt to the situation until we get back to something that is where we're able to spend more time back in the studios.
Okay, that's interesting stuff there. Okay, I think obviously one of the key things for any of the students applying is going to be the portfolio. It's obviously very important, and obviously most of our students will be applying to a number of different places. There might be slightly different things on each portfolio request. What sort of things you're looking for? I know you've outlined a little bit in the presentation. Thought maybe if you want to go into a bit more detail about the types of things you like, anything particularly that you really like to see on the portfolio.
Well, it's all about showing potential. We're not looking for the finished product in any way, because you haven't yet started your degree with us. But what we do need is someone to demonstrate that they've got ideas that even if they've maybe not had a great deal of design tuition to date, that they've got that ability to follow through a project of any sort, that they've got an inquisitive nature, particularly about fashion. If that is what they now think they want to go into, they need to demonstrate that. So starting to show what designers they maybe are interested in, how those designers are then influencing their thought process, showing that they've got some degree of sort of drawing ability, because even if we are now moving towards sort of CAD and software fashion design, hand drawing is still very much a part of the initial sketching process. and just generally showing that you're someone that's looking to the future and not looking backwards, so to speak. So you're wanting to make it a better world fashion-wise, wanting to improve the way we dress, wanting to help make it a more sustainable fashion industry.
It's great. Just to reiterate, I mean, that obviously your advice again corresponds with, particularly with the technical side of it. Other design courses, so things like architecture, product design, where the same would be said, even though obviously those things at the higher end tend to be done on kind of CAD and computer things, that those hand drawing skills, that element of it, that freehand drawing is still so important to the industry and to you developing your ideas and your skills. So that's also corresponds with people here that are maybe looking at different areas of design, which can also be the case. Just sticking on that technical stuff, that kind of the garment cutting and construction and that side of it, is that something at all you would expect to see in the portfolio?
I need to say that all the portfolios come in at all different sort of levels, because people have had completely different sort of introductions through their school and college education. So some will have maybe done one garment project at school, and therefore they've got a tiny little bit of garment construction in their portfolio. Others won't have any at all. But what we do is we judge the portfolio submission as a whole submission. So it's, what is this student demonstrating? Because the gaps we can help fill. So if someone's not done any garment construction, obviously they'll pick that up with us from the word go, but they need to be demonstrating something else that is valid to the design process. If someone's got it all, that's great. But as I said, it's more about them showing elements that we can think, right, we can work with this student. Because if we give them a design brief and they've got one idea, and then after that one is ideas seen through, they've got no other ideas, they're going to really struggle on a course that is constantly about innovation and coming up with new thoughts.
Okay, that's fantastic. Really good advice there, really strong and clear. And then an interview, obviously this is going to be recorded. So when you come to do a personal statement, if you're looking at this, do go back and listen to what Bruce has said, because that's obviously a really good summary of the type of content that they're really looking for in the portfolio. Well, I think we've covered loads in a really short space of time. It's been really good. We've got rocketed through it. That's fantastic. Again, if anyone wants to add any comments to the chat, please do so. I think I've just got a couple sort of nice questions to end with, Bruce, really, just to kind of see us out to the end. And I think obviously we talked a bit about you kind of getting into fashion at the moment. I think when I'm particularly working with students on their personal statement, I'm often trying to get that bit of inspiration from them and just find those people they really like, really want to work with. I just thought I'd ask you, who in terms of designers or even brands perhaps, but certainly in terms of individual designers, which were the ones that kind of really inspired you early on when you were getting into fashion as a career? And who are the ones now that you really kind of look to, you think are producing the most interesting work?
I think, well, the British heritage brands have always interested me. I worked for one for 12 years, Dax, where we turned it around for a kind of very staid brand to turned it into a major luxury global brand. And that was, a great kind of period to be working on that. That's where we took it from not even showing on the catwalk to showing on the Milan catwalk at the highest level. So we were in amongst Gucci, Prada, names like that on the schedule. But going back to what you were saying about influences, I think it's important in the statements that students are very sort of honest and transparent about what has inspired them and don't feel that they need to just work from a sort of template. So, for example, it was the punk period that inspired me to get into clothing because at that time, people were being slightly rebellious. They were slightly questioning the way they dressed, what they wanted to state. And that, I think, is really important. So, don't feel you've just got to say a sort of standard answer and pick two big design names and say that you're influenced by them. If you're actually influenced by a small designer from your own, local environment, if that designer really has had an influence on you, explain that, say why the design is key, what he or she have done, and how that's affected your progression to date. So just generally be really honest. If it was an exhibition you went to see that just blew your mind, explain why it blew your mind, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get into your mind to then see how we can help you develop.
Okay, that's a great answer again. And we have had that. So working with students, certainly Malaysian students, looked at it, and there's been a lot of inspiration there from small Malaysian designs or traditional Malaysian design, and that has been the kind of key theme that's kickstarted it. And then we've seen some fascinating ways they've converted that and mixed that with other styles as well. So again, just as Bruce has said, whatever your inspiration is, that's really good. So just getting thinking about that, that will help you understand what it is you want to do as well. So that's a really important thing. Okay, Bruce, I know you got somewhere else to be as well. That's great. I really appreciate you coming to join us. It was a fascinating talk. I think you've given a really kind of encompassing idea of the fashion industry and any developments in it and your course as well. So unless there's any further questions, I'd like to thank everyone for coming. We will stay, if it's okay, Bruce and Felicity, will stay on the line just for another few minutes. So while the students are leaving, if any of you want to stay on and just ask verbally any questions, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, we'd like to say good evening. And if you can leave the Zoom call now, that would be great. All right, thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Look forward to receiving applications.
Certainly will.